I certainly want to be open to what the other players have to say. Scott Newman, the drummer, Tim Harrison, the piano player. We've been together for over 12 years. It's our fourth album together. The strength of the band is the fact that we're a band, that we have played together this long and we know each other and we have a shared language for this stuff. It's why the music sounds the way it does. It helps give it an identity.
Welcome to episode 149 of the Bass Shed Podcast. My name is Ryan Roberts. All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome to the Bass Shed Podcast. If this is your first time checking out the show, please make sure to hit subscribe wherever you are listening to it. And if you are watching it on YouTube, please hit subscribe and hit the little bell to get notified about new bass content that happens regularly. On the show is Mark Wade. Mark Wade is a double bassist, composer, and band leader. Mark Wade's a good friend of the podcast. He's been on before. He was on episode 25. He was also on episode 67. Every time he's been on, Mark has a new album, right? It's fascinating and inspiring how often Mark is putting together new music and these new pieces of art to release into the world with these albums he's doing. Every album is fantastic. They're always very engaging. They always have a very cool concept. His playing on all of them is fantastic. I highly recommend checking them all out. And this time is no different. Mark has a new album titled New Stages. A little bit about Mark. Mark leads a long-standing piano trio that blends composition and improvisation in a really thoughtful way. His latest album, New Stages, explores what happens when classical repertoire meets the jazz language. This project reimagines works from composers like Bach, Chopin, Debussy, and Rachmaninoff for the piano trio. Mark uses harmonic reinterpretation, new grooves, and improvisation to reshape the material while still respecting the original music. Mark and I talk about the compositional process behind the album, including how Mark chooses pieces that will translate well for the trio, and how he adapts harmony and form, and how elements like pentatonic language, odd meters, and rubato phrasing bridge the worlds of classical music and jazz. A little bit more about my conversation with Mark in a second, but first there's a couple things I want to talk about. lemurmusic.com. If you play upright bass, you probably already know Lemur Music. They've been serving the bass community for decades with a great selection of strings, accessories, sheet music, and bass gear. Stop by, check out their inventory, lemurmusic.com. Use the promo code TheBassShed, all one word, for 10% off. All right, folks, I'm excited to tell you about the book I put together with bass legend Jerry Jamont. Jerry Jamont, 15 Timeless Bass Lines. Jerry Jamont, 15 Timeless Bass Lines explores 15 classic bass lines from Jamont's incredible career. The lines that help define the sound of soul and R&B recordings by artists like Aretha Franklin, King Curtis, and so many more. You can find Jerry Jamont 15 Timeless Bass Lines at thebassshedacademy.org or click on the link in the show notes below. All right, as I mentioned, my guest on the episode is Mark Wade. Mark Wade has been leading the same piano trio for, if I remember correctly, 12 years. It's a long-standing trio that has explored a lot together and definitely has a cohesive sound. Mark and I talk about that, like the importance of having a group and not just doing pickup gigs. It's such an important process to cultivate a sound and investigate new sounds, especially when you're dealing with a project of this magnitude. Having that kind of trust and being able to rely on the intuition of the other musicians is incredibly important. This is a fantastic new album by Mark. Again, it's titled New Stages. Everybody, do yourself a favor, go check it out. There's a link in the show notes below. And here it is. Here's my talk with double bassist, composer, and band leader Mark Wade.
How you doing?
Hey man, how you doing?
Yeah, it's been a minute. What's
it has been
the latest and greatest? Yeah.
Man, you're on a pretty solid track. You do a record like what? Maybe every 2.5 years. You're staying with it.
I'm trying. It's been this one. There was might have been an extra year there in between or whatever. I was trying to line up this record label and see if they would take it, and they did. So that was kind of mostly a good thing.
Did they also sign your previous records?
No, we haven't talked about any of the previous ones. Just just this one for now. Yeah.
Okay. You got a new record out called New Stages. I definitely want to talk about that. I was checking it out last night. I always like your writing. I always like your writing. I remember the last record. Which one was the last record? Because we've done 2 interviews about 2 records.
Yeah, the last one was True Stories.
True Stories, that's right. And then the Moving Day was the first record.
Yeah, correct. That's right. Yeah.
So I remember on True Stories, there was a compositional element of kind of blending the jazz tradition and repertoire with the classical tradition and repertoire to some extent. And then you're kind of elaborating on that with this new record.
Yeah, I think in this case, if before I kind of dipped my toes in the water, this time I took the plunge.
Okay.
Where the full like the bent of the album, like the whole like kind of thing behind the album was taking existing classical music from all across the spectrum that, you know, I had really just somehow become enamored with over the years, either from playing or hearing it, and to try to take that and turn it into something that would belong in a set of my own original music.
Mm-hmm. You know. What were the album, your new record is 11 tracks. What were the 11 classical pieces that were drawn from for these?
Well, so actually this confused the label quite a bit. I think when we first put it out, there's actually if there are 9 pieces, but it breaks down to 15 tracks because some of them are movement, like it's a suite of music.
Okay.
So it's a little confusing how it works. So there's so it's 9 different pieces. Some of them are solo works, like say a solo piano work by 2 by Chopin, 1 by Debussy, and then other things are large orchestral works. So it's a mix, and you know, stuff that from Baroque, 1 piece of Bach, all the way up into, you know, 20th century, you know, early 20th century, or even later 20th century writing. So choosing the pieces, like it started with, I heard it and there was just something about it that I really loved, like kind of that simple. Like, I don't know what I'm going to do with this. I don't know how I'm going to do something with this. I have to do something. Like, I really, really love it. So it starts with that. And then it's kind of the process of going through and saying, okay, what did I love about this? And then how does this relate to what I do? Like, how does it relate to my band? How does it relate to a jazz piano trio? Which is a bit of a stretch, obviously, with some of these things. And that, again, that was the fun challenge, to try to tease out the essence of these works. In some cases, like the melodies or maybe a certain harmonic movement, but a lot of times adding in a lot of my own kind of thoughts and material with it to turn it into something that is not just Beethoven with a beat. You know, it's not just or a fifth of Beethoven for anybody out there who remembers that thing. It really is meant to be was a very thoughtful exercise in composing and arranging and kind of straddling old and new.
Mm-hmm. What was that process like? And like, specifically, let me break up. There's a couple questions in my mind here. Was there one uniformed process for each of the tunes? We'll start there.
Okay. Was there a uniform process? No, I'd say there isn't, just because of the variety of the material I'm dealing with. You know, something like the piece on the album that is Requiem, a three movement thing, is taken from the Duraflé Requiem, a piece for, you know, vocal soloist, choir, and orchestra. So maneuvering something like that is going to be very different than maneuvering a solo piece by Chopin. So if there was a general process, it was kind of like what I said, of like, okay, I love this, but what about it do I love? What about this do I love that works for us, you know, for my trio? And then the process of saying, okay, that's great. In and of itself, it works, but how does this fit into the larger project of this album? You know, I have this kind of song, and I have this kind of thing, and I have a song that goes like this, and I have something that goes like that. Where does this fit in? Is it very similar to one of the other things I've written? Then maybe I might discard it. So it's a bit of a jigsaw puzzle. I was really trying to be very thoughtful at like the big picture level, and then the medium picture level, and then the small picture level, you know, getting very granular sometimes with just phrases and motives. So, yeah, it was a fun process for sure.
How many Now, in your email, you told me that this has been going on. This has been like an 8-year project that's been kind of just marinating and been in the incubator. How many pieces, if you could qualify a specific number, were there to begin with, and how many got left on the chopping block?
Well, nothing got left on the chopping block for this one.
Okay.
Everything I wrote made it. Now, it's a lot of music. It's 72 minutes worth of music, essentially a double album worth of stuff. So it was challenging, just to record all that and get it all together and rehearse it was, of course, a challenge. So nothing got left on the chopping block in that sense. It was everything made it, but 8 years. So when we were talking back in 2018 for Moving Day, or 2022 for True Stories, I was writing this project in the background kind of as I went. In fact, the very first thing that I wrote for this, I wrote right after my first record in 2015. So it goes back a ways. I wrote it, and it was something that I really liked. It was a piece that really struck me. I wrote it. It was actually the track off the record, Waltz and Variation. And I thought, well, this is cool, but this is kind of different than the rest of my stuff. Do I want to keep going down this road and writing like a set of this stuff, or what do I want to do? And I kind of left it. And then I kind of would come back to that. I'd hear something else and I'd say, okay, let me write something like that. Now I've got 2 of these. And so this process kind of went along. I had to kind of make a decision, like, did I want to do the music that ended up being on Moving Day? Did I want to do the music that ended up being on True Stories? I ultimately decided I didn't want to do this project quite as early out of the gate for me. I wanted people to know like the original music that I wrote that was not maybe quite so concept based, or something that was maybe quite as specific as this project. And I also wanted to give myself a lot of time to really find the right set of music and be thoughtful with it and have it be the way I wanted it to be. So
now, on the topic of that specifically, where it's always been in the background and it's been being nurtured over time, where does the title come from? New Stages, when it's this project seems like more of a marathon than something that's super fresh.
Well, that's a good observation. New Stages really because, well, I kind of thinking of it in terms of like, this is a lot of concert music that's been on, that people go see on stage all the time, but they would have never seen it this way. And it's also a new writing project for us, for the Mark Wade Trio, and for me. So it's new in that sense. It's meant to take what is obviously very old material and make it sound new, and make it sound like it's something that is new.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk through the record a little bit. There's a lot of really cool stuff on here, and the links that were sent to me. It starts like track 1, boom, you're just swinging. It sounds like I'm just dropped into the middle, like I just walked in halfway through a piano solo or something at a club. There's like no context for what I'm listening to. And it was, I don't want to say jarring, atypical, I would say, but I was into it because automatically it had my attention. Because it's like, okay, I'm here. What is this? And it's like, what are we doing? What are we doing here? So it has a really unique entry point for the listener. Talk me through that decision.
Yeah, well, that is somewhat by design. So that very first piece is part of my take on Claude Debussy's Children's Corner Suite, suite written for solo piano. If you're a fan of classical piano literature, that would be something that you would know. It's part of that repertoire. And that piece itself starts actually much faster than our version right out of the gate. It is just 100 miles an hour, just as a starting place. So I thought, okay, well, we'll do that too. And I thought that was kind of a good way to get, like you said, it gets people's attention. It's kind of a sudden kind of thing. And it then unfolds over the rest of the this movement, these 4 pieces. I took 4 of 6 of the 6 original ones from Debussy's suite to create these. So the first one is a piano feature. The second one is kind of a drum feature. The third one is a feature for me. And the fourth one is all 3 of us. So it kind of is a way of giving everybody a little feature before we all come together and play a tune that is both Debussy's and a little bit of Thelonious Monk.
Yeah. Getting into track 2, Elephant's Lullaby. What was the classical piece? What's the jazz influence? What's the Mark Wade fingerprint? What are the diagnostics and the forensics on this?
Yeah. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. Dr. Gratis, Elephant's Lullaby, the one that follows it there, Shepherd Takes a Turn, and Cakewalk. All 4 of those are part of that Debussy suite.
Okay.
So technically, this Elephant's Lullaby is a combination of another part of the first movement and a second movement. So I've already gone off the map, if you will, of taking from different parts of him to create something a little different that I thought kind of sounded together. You know, if you listen to a lot of like French impressionistic music at the time and Debussy's music at the time, without getting too nerdy here, like there's a lot of pentatonic scales. There's a certain kind of sound that makes that music sound good, and those scales translate really well for jazz. Sure. As well. Sure. So I thought that was an opportunity to kind of show how those two elements go together.
And then how do you decide? Because first of all, I think we've already crossed the threshold of being too nerdy by the nature of just what I'm doing here with the whole thing. Yeah, we're already on the other side of that fence.
Nice.
Pentatonics being a big part of Debussy's compositions, but also being such a strong language within jazz, and then how those have evolved with pairing them and creating, you know, I don't want to say hybrid sounds, but there's a complete language related to pentatonics as it relates to jazz theory. How do you decide how far to go down the jazz trail with the pentatonic thing?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think this is true probably the entire album. That was always a consideration. It was a delicate treatment of the music to say like, okay, are we going like, you know, how jazz are we going to get? Right. How much of the original classical sound do we want to retain? Where is that point that it also still sounds like me, that I'm speaking with my voice as a composer without getting a little, you know, too grandiose about it, but that is a consideration. I'm a strong believer for any project that it's got to have a singular voice, that it doesn't sound like, oh, here's my album and I have, you know, this Latin tune and this ballad and this one thing over there. Right, and they're great on their own, but they don't sound like they belong on the same record.
Sure, it's like when you do those pickup gigs, everybody does a medium swing, you're going to do a rhythm changes. Now let's play something in 3, and you're just going through checking all the boxes. Yeah,
right.
I agree with you that it should be one collective piece of work.
Yeah, it's got to sound like it all belongs on the same record. Right. And so that was something, you know, some of these things on the album sound a little bit quote unquote more classical. There's times when I stayed a little closer to the original, and there's times when I took great liberties to be mild about it, to be, you know, to underplay it. So, you know, actually the Elephant's Lullaby, that particular piece is a case where there's a section of that is literally, I copied note for note from Debussy's score for a little bit. But then it trails off into, you know, maybe more what we do. And if you don't notice which is which, then I feel like I did my job.
Yeah. What on the topic of deciding how jazz, how classical, how did that translate to the decision to not bring in arco playing?
Yeah, that was very much part of that, because I feel like the minute you start to play with the bow, and I love to play with the bow, and that's all great, but the minute you start to do that, now you're kind of there. You're in that point where it's like, oh, he's trying to be a classical bass player, and that's not. This meant to always be a dance on either side of the line. That maybe at times you had a hard time deciding where it was. Sure. And I didn't want to maybe pigeonhole myself quite that much.
Okay. There are some there's some beautiful records maybe you've heard. I think I'm probably going to butcher the gentleman's name. Enrico something. Mm-hmm. He's an Italian guy. He did a duo record with Mark Johnson. I don't know. Have you checked out those records?
You know, I don't know them well, but I know at least vaguely what you're referring to.
The guy's name, Italian per something.
Yeah. I can't remember his name.
Maybe it's better that I don't even attempt it. But I was thinking about those records while listening to your album. One, I love those records. And I was actually kind of waiting for an appearance of some arco playing to and I wasn't disappointed that it didn't happen, but I was just kind of figuring it was going to make an appearance to have that kind of nod of the hat, you know.
Yeah.
But it was an interesting decision not to go there, and it was something I was aware of that decision wasn't made.
Well, in a way, I feel like that was my intention. It was I purposely withheld anything with a bow, for that reason. Yeah.
I remember specifically on I believe it was your first album, the use of odd meter.
Yeah.
And the track Cakewalk here is in 5 on the new record. Now on the bridge, is the bridge in 3 or is the bridge in 9?
The bridge is still in 5, but
Really?
the way that we play with it's a little deceptive. So this tune breaks down to like, AABA, like a lot of song forms do in jazz, right? And which is completely not what happens on a lot of this record, and certainly it doesn't happen out through this whole Debussy suite. But here I thought it would be cool to just like, let's go to like that traditional jazz kind of thing. So the A's are Debussy's music, and the B is an adaptation of a Thelonious Monk bridge of a few different tunes that I kind of combined, because I thought that Cakewalk sounded a little bit like Monk if you were to use your imagination, which I did liberally here. So the hallmark of Monk's music is sometimes to hide the meter. Say what time signature is that? And it was in 4. Okay. because they hide the beat so well.
Right.
So that was what I was trying to do here.
Displacement thing. Yeah. In general, which is brilliant.
Yeah.
Okay, we're still in 5, huh?
Yeah, all the way.
Now I'm going to go back with my abacus and try to listen again. So then we get into track 5, Saga. This is a very, very, very pretty ballad. What I love about your playing in general, I love your phrasing. You have very strong phrasing that is patient and is very committed to a narrative. I don't ever feel any of the albums I've heard you play that you're trying to prove that you're doing a thing. Yeah. You're like, it's not like, oh, watch me do this little thing, device, whatever you want to call those. And this track 5 has a very, very patient bass solo in it that I really liked. And talk about that just from a player's standpoint, about cultivating that type of patience in improvisation.
Sure. I mean, well, thank you very much for saying that. I mean, I love playing on ballads, certainly. I think that I'm always trying to copy, we're all trying to copy like the masters that we've heard that have done this. And I think a hallmark of all of the greatest players as soloists, just pure expression as soloists, are ones that see their solo as having a beginning and a middle and an end, and telling a story within that solo. And so if you're going to come out of the gate at 100 miles an hour, that's fine, but with an intention of where that's going to go after that you have a plan for down the road, that it isn't just as many notes as I got and then I run out of ideas and I still got 8 bars left in the chorus or something like that. Right. So to me, like the soloists that I've always aspired to be like had that kind of sense of development in their solo, that they knew how to say more with less when that was appropriate, and then also how to say more with more too, right? That you always have that option. A good soloist would have that option in their bag. So, and also this particular arrangement helps lend itself to that. The idea that we solo on 2 different sections, a section that is a ballad and a section that goes into a jazz waltz. And the tune goes back and forth between those 2 feels.
You spoke just a second ago about introducing more of a quintessential jazz form. A big part of classical music, Western European music, whatever term wants to be used, concertos, sonatas, all these things are descriptions of form. And so how did you utilize a lot of the Western European form when putting this together?
That's really interesting. It's a good question, actually, because when you think about it, just like you said, like we think of forms in jazz. Well, forms exist in all kinds of music, including classical music. That a symphony has a, the big movement, the middle movement, the second movement, which is like a ballad. The slow movement. There's the movement in three.
There's rules to it. The A section's in 2, walk the bridge. It has the same kind of unspoken rule. Yeah,
it's exactly. And look, those are the big picture stuff that I feel like you can pick up on when you make this translation from what is two very different things. The Saga is taken from the Sibelius Violin Concerto. So this is a gigantic orchestral work with a violin soloist playing insane cadenzas. Well, how are we going to how are we going to do that? We're a piano trio. Nobody's playing violin, and I can't play those cadenzas on my instrument. That's not happening. So what do we do? And I think that what the point you bring up is an excellent one, that there are these different forms within these original works, which are taking place over large periods of time. We're talking about a concerto that is 40 minutes long, and just that first movement, which we mostly use, has these different sections. Well, some of my piece mirrors some of those sections that were in the original. Mm-hmm. I expand on them. I might change them in a little bit, but absolutely, that's a roadmap to get through the music.
Was that a factor of the music you were purposely addressing, was form, or was it just, I kind of want the melody to dictate the flow of this piece or the sections, and not necessarily like, here's what the form is going to be?
Yeah, I would say on default, I would always default to where the melody's heading and how that wants to unfold. But in many cases, I mean, the answer to your question is yes. It's kind of both sometimes, because sometimes, these compositions so strong, and so, so well crafted, that if you do get into the guts of these things and spend the time to dig around in the score and really understand these things, in a lot of these cases, I play them and perform them, so you get the understanding of being in the orchestra and what you're hearing and how you respond. Certainly, the form dictates that as well, too, when it's something that is so strong and powerful.
Moving into track 6, "The Storm." This, from note 1, it sets the tone of what the title is. Like, just boom, like, okay, we're there. It's like right away. Talk about this tune and what the classical influence was for it, and then what the treatment on it happened to be.
So this is, I often say that this is taken from Debussy's one of the Debussy preludes for solo piano, D minor. I think it was Opus 24, and which he called "The Storm," and that is true. I did. Most of this is from that, but the introduction is actually not him. It is the famous introduction to Rachmaninoff's Second Piano Concerto. So I have taken two different, piano things and kind of stitched them together here. Rachmaninoff's introduction that sets this up, it indicates almost this very stormy kind of thing, and I thought it worked perfectly if I put the two together. So if you were a classical buff, if you really knew what you were, all this rep, you would hear this and think it was one, and then you get the switcheroo on the downbeat, and then it's Chopin the rest of the way. One of the things that Chopin was my introduction to classical music. Listening to his solo piano works is how I learned about classical music.
Interesting.
And one of the things that always struck me with his music and with that romantic quote unquote period in music in general is the way that the time kind of pushes and pulls, that it stretches and elongates depending on the phrase, which is really beautiful. But I thought, well, how are we going to do that? The band can't collectively speed up and slow down. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So I thought, well, we just won't play in time at all. We'll take the time away and allow that freedom to happen with a trio where we all have the freedom to kind of push and pull wherever we need to.
Right.
So that was really how I figured, okay, that's how we'll realize that rubato feeling. We'll just play out of time the whole time.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's, I liked that element of it. And there's also elements on the album that feel like, a fermata is happening or something. Like you get to a point and things just take a pause it's not a bar of 5, or it's not a pulsed break or punctuation on the phrase.
Mm-hmm.
There's definitely, it's introducing a lot of like kind of on cue elements.
Absolutely. Yeah, the ending of this tune is one of those where you've listened to the track up until the end of the bass solo. Everything's been out of time. Everything has had this freedom. And then we stop for a second and suddenly we're in very strict time. And I which I patterned off kind of like some of the earlier Brad Mehldau albums, the way that he would set up his left hand in this kind of arpeggiated sound while the melody happened.
Right.
To create a different kind of tension, and to kind of break the flow of this out of time stuff, this ending that is in time and drives through, kind of punctuates that energy in a different way.
Mm-hmm. Speaking, I mean, the other aspect that has to be addressed, not only the time and rhythm, but obviously harmony. And did you sit with like the scores and kind of evaluate and analyze what harmonic devices were being used in the classical works and then adapt those? Because obviously jazz is a highly harmonic, Rubik's Cube. And, with the focus so much on the harmony, more so than the melody or the form sometimes, how did you deal with connecting these two genres or two different canons of music through harmonic values?
Yeah, I mean, I did. For all of these things, I've got the score out, and I'm if it's a solo piano work, that's a little easier to digest. Or sometimes I've got the full score, orchestra and choir in front of me, and I'm looking to see what they're doing and what kind of like harmonic areas they might be in. Sometimes it's obvious, sometimes a little less so, or sometimes it relates closely to maybe what I might do, and sometimes not very much. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I'm taking exactly those things, and sometimes I'm rejecting them completely and coming up with my own. But it always started with, well, what is the original? Like, what are they doing?
Sure.
I mean, I went out and, I bought the score to the Rodrigo Guitar Concerto, which I used in Iberia, which comes a little later in the album. And I'm, I'm looking at the score, I'm building the harmony, I'm thinking what they did, listening to the recording. And then only after that am I starting to actually kind of think about what we're going to do, to create my own thing from it.
How many recordings of a classical work would you kind of check in with to get different interpretations of?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, to be honest, maybe not a lot, because like I said, like a lot of these things I picked because, like, especially the orchestral works, I picked because I played them, because I was in the orchestra and I heard it and I was like just blown away. So I felt like more than any, I mean, of course, there's a million great recordings out there, which were better orchestras than the one I was playing in maybe when I originally heard it. But no matter, like, that experience, that personal connection to the music when it happened, I mean, nothing can beat that. That's what inspired this whole project from the beginning. Yeah. So if I had that in mind, I'd go back and I'd find a recording that I liked, great orchestra, some famous recording maybe. But I didn't source a lot of different recordings, because look, if you listen to like Beethoven 5 and you listen to 10 different recordings with 10 different conductors and 10 different orchestras, you can hear 10 different impressions of it, right? But I knew that I was going to make my own impression of it anyways, and I didn't need to maybe research a million different classical approaches to it.
We'll be back right after this.
Folks, if you're digging this episode, there's a way to be more involved with this show. With the Bass Shed Backstage Pass, you can submit questions for future guests and be a part of the podcast. You'll also get access to extras like the 5 Spot, which is a rapid-fire look at how each guest responds to different aspects of bass culture, plus extended conversations, behind-the-scene moments, and other podcast extras. There's also lessons and transcriptions through the Bass Shed Academy to support your playing. If you want in, hit the link below or scan the QR code on the screen. Backstage Pass. Take part in the Bass Shed podcast. All right, folks, the Woodshed Bass. The Woodshed Bass is a bass that is a collaboration between Woodcraft Guitars and the Bass Shed. The Woodshed Bass is designed for players that want a classic look, reliability, and a bass that cuts in a mix with a lot of tonal options. Check it out, the Woodshed Bass.
Excellent, sir.
When going through these scores and decoding, analyzing, and introducing what you want to do with it harmonically and through forms, what are some go-to? Well, there's a better way to ask that. What do you feel informs your harmonic decisions as a composer? More of the classical Western European thing, more of the jazz tradition, somewhere in the middle, kind of an ECM approach to really pastel chords.
Yeah, I mean it's a good question. I would say, I mean, right off the bat, my first way of thinking is that it's just the harmonic language I had always been writing with, which would be jazz, right? It would be kind of some of the tricks of the trade that I've learned as a writer up to this point. I mean, I've written a fair amount of music at this point. I have a certain voice which is easy for me to fall back on, but this project did force me to kind of add to that language and decide, like, when I'm using something that's closer to the original, is that because that's what's best, or am I maybe being lazy? Am I not exploring all the options? Is this the best choice? I think that's the question I always ask. Like, is this the best choice? Is this what sounds best to me? And if it's something simple, don't make it complicated. If it needs to be more complicated, don't leave it to be quite so simple. It was a very careful deliberation with all this music. I think that's why it took so long.
Were there any attempts to just completely flip something, let's just put it on its head and see what happens? And just kind of experimenting with what the bandwidth of this piece of music could be, and like, let's investigate it this way, let's flip it on the side, see what happens with it that way.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I don't think I ever approached one and said, let me take this, what's the craziest I could make it? I was never trying to do anything for effect. It was always because I just kind of heard it that way. And it was an idea that felt natural to me. But certainly Waltz and Variation on this recording is an adaptation of Chopin Piano Waltz, number 69 in A-flat major, the Goodbye Waltz. Again, not one of his more famous waltzes, but the very first piece of Chopin I ever heard. So I thought I should include it. And if you know the music of Chopin, it's French music and it's a waltz, and I turned it into an up-tempo jazz drum feature.
Right.
in multiple meters, but mostly in 4. So that would be a pretty big stretch from the original. Sure.
Moving through the album, track 7 is Idol. And this, to me, right away, was a very kind of humorous placement because it's literally the calm after the storm.
Yeah.
And it was, I'm just like, okay, I don't know if that's, I know that you were aware of that decision. I didn't know how purposed it was, but I knew that crossed your, so let's talk about this tune and why that placement was there, and if it was for that reason or not.
Yeah, first of all, to answer your question, 100%. Yeah, it was, after all the stuff from the storm, which is a rather dark and turbulent kind of thing. Yeah. To get this is definitely the calm after the storm, Idol. This one too, I thought, to me, is a bit humorous, just because the original is taken from some incidental music in Wagner's opera Siegfried. This is the Siegfried Idol. And so this gets played a lot as concert music separate from the opera, so that you don't have to sit through 5 hours of Wagner. You can just listen to the Idol. I've played it a number of times, and I just thought, so beautiful. There's a certain harmonic change in there that he used that I was always just like, that, I don't know what that is. That's amazing. I have to go get the score and find out what it was. And then I decided, okay, I'll do this. So it's this piece of very Teutonic music that we kind of drift into this almost gospel kind of feel that becomes really this Americana kind of thing as we drift away from the melody. So this was one that that makes me chuckle a little bit, just because it is one that subtly is extremely far away from what the original was meant to be. I mean, it's about as Germanic opera as you can get. And at a certain point, I remember the recording engineer said, it sounds like you guys went to church,
Yeah, this one does have kind of I think out of everything that I had heard so far on the record, and even afterwards on the record, it has the most kind of commercial value to it. It has kind of, it's very approachable to the listener,
Yeah.
And now the harmonic switcheroo that's in the original, did that influence how that tune resolves? Because I think just by hearing, is that the flat six? Does it resolve to the flat six?
Yeah, it does at the end. That is not what Wagner, that wasn't the change from the original that I was particularly picked up on.
But did that influence that decision?
But it did. There's a certain movement there that would be, at least to me it did. I think that if you, it's a slightly more obscure reference that makes sense to me, and you picked up, and you might pick up on it. Yeah. Maybe not everybody might, but yeah, that was it's always about, for me, like trying to find that, to keep a big picture view of like what's happening in what happens in this piece. What's the original? What does it do big picture wise, whether it's a harmony change or a sense of how does it sound tense, and how do they do that? What harmonies do they use to create that? And what do I want to do? I'm always trying to keep a big picture view of the vibe of the original, and chart the course from there, and never get too bogged down into like, well, is it this note or that note? That's important too. But I think for a project like this, in order for it to sound authentic, I had to kind of keep an eye on the big picture.
Speaking of big picture, how does that concept, which is keeping the big picture of the tune as an entire, impact you as an improviser in all the settings that you are in and improvising, whether it's this music, whether it's a standards gig, whether it's other things of yours that you played? How does keeping your improvisations in context in a big picture view?
That's a great question. Yeah, it's actually a great question, and I think an important one. So the whole point for me, just in general, if I write music, is to create interesting landscapes for all of us to play over, for the band, for me, for the piano player, for the drummer, whatever, to give everybody an equal voice and to have something interesting to play over. And it's not that rhythm changes isn't interesting to play over, or an F blues isn't interesting to play over, but we've heard that quite a bit, right? So with all of my music, I've always tried to create these different landscapes to play over, which does maybe put you in a different space, a different headspace as an improviser, that you're not just going to play the same stuff, but okay, well, how am I going to play over just these two chords? And then what's the vibe of the song? And so then what does that then mean for my playing? It's not just all my stuff. It's a certain kind of way that maybe I'm going to approach this as a soloist that might change from another piece. The Storm, completely out of time, and with harmony that moves kind of whenever we all decide to move on. Well, you're naturally going to play very different than if you're playing something like Idol, which has this Americana, almost gospelish feel at times. Totally is going to change your approach as a soloist. So I like that. That's one of the things that I've always really liked about having the ability to write the music for the band, is to kind of dictate some of these big picture landscapes for us to play over.
Moving through the record, track 8, Liberia? Is it
Iberia? Yeah,
Iberia. Okay, it was Iberia. The strong opening to this, it has a very royal sound, a very strong European, grandiose kind of thing. And then it goes into a bass solo pretty early on. The bass solo sounded scripted. Was that improvised, or was that a piece from another classical work?
Yeah, this is 100% note for note the solo parts are well, with the exception of the beginning. The very beginning, actually, I wrote.
Okay.
That's actually my music that I wrote to set up what is, for the first part of this, the majority of Rodrigo's famous guitar concerto, the second movement of that. This would be one of those pieces that if you don't know classical music, you probably have heard the famous melodies from this movement. Famously, Miles Davis adapted this for Sketches of Spain, the very first track off Sketches of Spain with Gil Evans. I always loved that record. It was one of my favorite records, and I always said, God, one day I would love to have a chance to play that, to play that melody, in live performance. And so I went. This was actually one of the hardest ones for me to do, as far as to take from the original and what to do with it. This, to go through the concerto, to go through the guitar parts, the solo guitar parts, to go through the orchestra parts, to not have it just be a straight reading from the orchestra. This is one where we, hew pretty close to the original, so it was even harder to make it not sound too close to the original. I had to transpose. I transposed this went like up a third or something to a friendlier key for the double bass, because the guitar parts are pretty tough, and I wanted to put it in a little friendlier key for the double bass.
What was the original key?
B minor is the original. Okay. And we do it in D minor, I think.
Sure.
So it gives me a few extra open strings. But so the cadenza parts are the solo parts from the guitar. So I pretend to be a Spanish guitar player there for a little bit and live out my fantasy as a flamenco guitar player for a few bars. And yeah, it's totally scripted. I learned it this would be the one part on the record that I learned like a classical piece of music, where it's a concerto. The notes are the notes. You have to play the notes. You have to play the notes in a certain style, in a certain way. That, of course, I'm setting up the parameters for all of this. Nobody's making me do this, but that's what I wanted to do. So the long unaccompanied cadenza, that's just playing your instrument, like kind of approaching it a little bit like a classical musician.
Okay. And then, so that's part one, and then we have Iberia part two, which is a drastically different feel. Talk about this.
Yeah, so this whole work, part 1 and 2, it has original music of mine, the music from Rodrigo from his guitar concerto de Aranjuez. Yeah, and my Spanish is terrible, so apologies to anybody listening. But
my English is terrible, so no judgment.
Well, good. and then it moves into some another bit of Spanish music written by a Russian. That's Rimsky-Korsakov for his Capriccio Español, and a movement of his, and then it goes into Chick Corea's La Fiesta. So it's a mix of two Americans. It's like two Americans, a Spaniard, and a Russian walk into a bar, and then they
walk into a jazz bar.
Exactly, and this is what they came out with. Yeah. So there's so much great music out there that is like quote unquote Spanish music or Spanish sounding music that wasn't done by Spanish composers. A lot of French composers, a lot of other people, spent some time in that Spanish idiom. And I thought that it was kind of interesting to kind of explore that and to take, a quote unquote my Spanish medley and have it be, from so many different sources.
The Chick Corea, I didn't know that was woven into it, but it was definitely came through. And I've noticed that on some of your other compositions where you'll put a couple things together, there's the chick thing always really stands out. And also this has that, it was a big part of his music, the Latin rhythms and the Spanish culture. So that all translates, and obviously made me think of Chick's writing too. The next track is Judgment.
Yes.
Was this tune purposely given the title at the end? Was this like some kind of final judgment that's implied or something? Because you always think of that as almost the ending of something. The sense of judgment is going to be a conclusion.
Yeah. So actually, it wasn't meant to be at the end of the record as a finality, but you're on the right track. So these next 3 tracks is Judgment, Transition, and At Rest. These are taken from the Requiem written by Maurice Duraflay. This is not something everybody knows. I've played the piece a few times because in some of the pickup orchestras I might play in, it's a easier piece for the choir to tackle if they're not pros. But the solo parts are quite difficult, and they're sung by professionals. But I've played it a few times with like kind of not as great orchestras. But it's a wonderful piece of music, wonderful piece of French music, I think from the early 20th century or late 19th century. And it's a requiem. It's a mass for the dead, the Catholic mass for the dead. So Judgment, I thought, was rather appropriate for, that whole vibe. And we go through Judgment, Transition, at Rest, which is essentially kind of the big picture story of those requiem masses anyways.
After this project taking so long to come together, and then you get the collection of pieces together, you record it, you're releasing it out into the world. The release date is what, by the way? It's coming up in March, correct?
Yeah. So the March 27 is the release date. This is coming out on Dot Time Records. This is the first time I'm partnering with Dot Time, which has been a learning process for me. I'm used to releasing these albums on my own. They've self-released stuff. So now I'm working with someone else. So it's been, it's been really interesting, and it's been part of this process has just been adjusting to working with someone else who also has a stake in your music. Sure. Of course, I'm very grateful that they've picked me up. There's it's a wonderful thing to have, but it's also a learning process, for the release. But I'm really excited about working with them and helping them get my music out to a wider audience.
What was it like personally and on an emotional level to have this music kind of out of you? And was there almost like a fallout from that? Because it's been there. It's been a part of your life. This concept has been a part of your life for close to a decade. And now it's, you're sending it off to school, and it's, you're releasing it into the wild. What was that process like?
Yeah, that's a good point. 'Cause anytime, any album you make, people if you don't make albums, they don't realize just how much time you're spending with this music, whether it's writing the music, practicing the music, performing the music, then you record the music, then it's mixing the music and listening to this stuff over and over again in the mixing process and the mastering process, the editing process. So you spend so much time with this music. And before we even got to the studio, in some of the cases, we had spent so much time with this music that it really is, it was just a relief to finally to have it done. It was just great to finally have it get out there and be done with that, because it's been rolling around for a while. And for me, that's always the feeling with every album. I spend a lot of time thinking about it and considering it, preparing for it. When it's out, it's a huge relief. And this one was doubly so, just given the length that I sat on some of this stuff.
Sure. When you were putting each individual piece together, and how much of that was a group effort with the trio of playing through ideas, and how much of that was just kind of at the coffee table and reading through scores and making notes, and how much of it was just away from the instruments?
I would say in general, the way I write is that I come home and it's I play the piano very poorly, but well enough to do what I need to do as a composer. And I write at the piano, and I write it all down, and I bring it to the band as a fully formed idea. It's a chart. It has all the information on it. We play it. Now, what happens after that is more of the collaboration. I have an idea for this groove and this thing and this vibe, and maybe we play it, and someone says, "What about this?" And I say, okay, let's try that. I certainly want to be open to what the other players have to say. Scott Newman, the drummer, Tim Harrison, the piano player. We've been together for over 12 years. It's our fourth album together. The strength of the band is the fact that we're a band, that we have played together this long, and we know each other, and we have a shared language for this stuff. It's why the music sounds the way it does. It helps give it an identity. So of course I want to listen to their feedback. Ultimately, it's my decision what we do with stuff. If I really feel strongly about an idea, I might insist on it. I might say, no, I really want to at least try it this way. But there have been many instances, including in this project, where I had an idea, I came in, and first contact with the band, we changed it because one of the other players had an idea or just went in a certain direction. I thought, great, let's do that.
Sure. After playing with that trio and those guys for so long, 12 years, how much of it is even verbal at this point? Like they know you, you know them, everybody's on the same page. You've been, doing this thing for a while, and there's an understanding that you just like, okay, I know what they do. That's why they're here. You don't even need to. It's almost like, when I play with people regularly, I don't want to talk about it. I just want to see what they'll do with it. Like, surprise me, like do your thing. And I have an idea of the neighborhood that'll live in, but I don't know specifics. And I just want you to show me, and I just want to hear it, and I'm probably going to love it.
Yeah, I think that's you're lucky if you're in a position where you can do that, when you have people that you know and that you trust, and that you say, hey, let's just play it and see what happens. And certainly the more time that I've spent in that band, the more time I've said exactly those words when I bring it in, like, let's just play it and see what happens.
Sure.
And I mean, it doesn't mean that you don't course correct or you don't hear something else, or maybe you did have an idea and you do want to maybe chase that. But that's all the kind of, for me, like the maturity of being a band leader this long and running a group this long, is knowing when it's okay to be like, no, I really do want this. I don't insist is a strong word, but I'm going to hold my ground on this and say, no, let's do it this way. And also knowing when to give ground. Not to come in with to be so stubborn as to say, oh, my way is the only way or was the best way. Someone might have a better idea, and let's see what they have to say.
Let's talk about just being a band leader for a second, because I'm in LA, you're in New York. In New York, are there more the bands, like people that are always playing together? In LA, it's a lot of pickup. A lot of, it's like one guy's got the gig and every week he's rotating new folks through. And I don't like that as much, because I think my favorite groups to listen to, specifically within jazz, it was a group of musicians that cultivated a sound together. Obviously we all have heard the supergroup albums. They kind of don't quite hit the same.
No,
like like, of course it's, on paper, given the personnel, amazing.
Sure.
But it doesn't have the same kind of juju that when it's a group and they've been playing, for years on end, that synergy that happens. So speak to that, and speak to your thoughts on that and ideas that made you put the trio together and have sustained it so long, and then just navigating the world of being a band leader and kind of an authority figure, but they're friends and they're people so dealing with that line too, kind of the work, professional, friend, social lines.
It is. Look, it's a challenge, right? To run a band, to keep a band playing, to keep it playing over a long period of time, to find the work, to keep it all happening. Obviously, it's a lot of work. Certainly here in New York, I mean, you can get both, right? You can get long-standing groups that will work together, and mine is not the only one, certainly. And you can I end up in plenty of pickup situations as well. It's kind of a mix of things. But, if people have a gig that they like, they tend to try to hold on to it. And you do see, those things kind of continue. It's great to have a chance to play with new people, but it's really maybe even a little better, like you said, to cultivate that sound, to build that chemistry. I feel like if our group has a superpower, it is just that. It's the fact that we are greater than the sum of our parts. The whole is greater than the sum of the parts with us, and that we sound the best because we played together a lot and we've developed that language. And so I feel like this fourth record is my favorite. And I always feel like each one is my favorite because we're better and we've had that much time together.
Sure.
And that shows. It shows in how we're able to present the music. So I'm very lucky, my name goes on it, but it's the Mark Wade trio, but all three of us are, I'm 1/3 of the sound. Everybody contributes equally to create this music in that sense. But you run that, we've been together 12 years. We knew each other before then. So by now, like, we're pretty comfortable dealing with one another. I know they know that if I ask for something, I don't ask very often. I'm never very insistent. So if I do, it's okay. They'll go with that, but then I don't try to overdo it and be too harsh. You got to give people, if you want them to be creative, you got to give them some space to create.
Right.
So that's always a delicate balance of, when do you, like I said before, when do you kind of hold to your vision and stick to your guns as the composer and the band leader, and when do you know to give ground? You learn that trial and error is, when I was younger, I was more stubborn. As I got older and a little wiser, I learned how to, loosen up a little bit without feeling like I was losing control.
See, that's funny. I was the exact opposite.
Oh, okay.
I was like, no, man, it's cool. And I would always kind of put myself in the shadows so that I wasn't going to be this, taskmaster or something. It's like, no, man, just do your thing. And then at the end of the thing, I'm like, no, I'm not. That's totally lost it. Like and I let it happen. So I had no one to be frustrated with except myself. But yeah, I did the exact opposite. I wasn't assertive enough about making sure my vision was there. It's
tough, right? It's very tough to run a band and to have all those dynamics. I mean, I'm the one who, I pay for the albums. I'm the one who's finding the gigs. I'm the one who's finding the work, but you can't, at least I don't think it's a great idea to treat people. You're not treating them like employees. It's not, you're trying not to be too much like that. Cause in the end, when the music's happening, you don't want it to be like that. You want everyone to be together, right? You want everybody to feel like they can do their thing and I can do my thing and we'll do it together.
Sure.
And that it's a collaborative process. So I think being a band leader is knowing when you got to know when to, put down the whip hand, and just and be cool and just, and everybody's trying their best. Look, if they're not the right people for the band, then you get somebody else.
That's right.
Then just, if you don't like what they're doing, you get somebody else. But if you do have them there and you do like what they do, then you got to let them do that sometimes.
And you mentioned that this album is the first in collaboration with the record label. Mm-hmm. Given the nature of the music industry, and jazz music being the small percentage of the music industry that it is.
Yeah.
What have you found the relevance of a label has been or will be with this record? Yeah.
So there's a million labels out there, right? And I could have been on a label for all of my records, but I decided not to because the jazz market is so small and the economics of this are not robust. Just put it
that's
politely,
a very classy way of saying that. Yeah,
let's try to not get too dark here. But there's only so much money out there, and there's a lot of very talented people who put out lots of great music, all deserving of your attention. It's hard for all of that to be heard, right? Mm-hmm. So for in this case, this specific label is one that they put up their own money for this. It's not me paying them to be on the, for the promotion or something like that. Like a lot of smaller labels, you'll get on there and then you're still giving them a fee to help cover the promotional costs. Right. I didn't have to, with them, they're a little bit bigger operation. They're shouldering the costs so because of that, and they have a more sophisticated marketing plan and marketing tools, stuff that I just don't have the time to put together. Right. That's the number one thing. It's like it's the name recognition of being on the label with some other artists who are well known and very talented. And Sheila Jordan, one of her last records was on Dot Time Records. So there's being associated with that helps to get some other eyeballs on you, and then just the practical reality of the resources, and that there's a social media person, and there's a person who's doing publicity for the US, and there's a person who's doing separate publicity for the UK when I go on tour there next month, and it just greater resources, that does help. There's only so much you can do on your own. Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, even just being a band leader, when you were speaking about all the hats you have to wear with tracking down the gigs, working with finances and getting all the details to the guys. Sometimes just scheduling a rehearsal is a full-time job, especially when, you got 3-4 different freelance musicians and everybody's taking every gig that they can all the time. Yeah. And it's a lot of hats to do all of that. So I can understand how freeing it must feel to offload the business aspect of releasing a record. Mm-hmm. That's got to feel great. You just spoke about it, the tour, the European tour. Let's talk about that. Yeah, so I'm March 19 is the first concert in Zurich, Switzerland. Head to Zurich. I'll be in Switzerland for 3 shows, kind of Zurich, and then some points east of there. So I'll be kind of in that region of the country. And then I travel to the UK, and I got about a week in the UK of concerts and some teaching that I do. I've been. This will be like, I think, my 5th time over to a place called Benslow Music, just north of London in the town of Hitchin. It's this very interesting setup. We don't really have anything that's quite analogous to it here in the United States. It's like this music school that is a bed and breakfast that people sign up for courses and they stay there for multiple days. And it's like a whole day of teaching. I mean, it's like a lot.
So it's kind of like a intensive, but you stay there. It's almost like a camp / intensive. Okay, interesting.
And it's all adults.
Okay.
And there's a lot of classical music there, but some jazz. And we're like I'm one of the jazz courses, and they've had me. I did the first one back in 2020, right before the pandemic.
Oh wow!
Took a break there for a year, and then I think in 2022 I might have been back, and I've been back ever since.
Okay.
They've really been so that's a nice thing that I do. So I'm at Benslow. I have a concert there. I'm very happy to be back at Pizza Express in London, which to Americans sounds like I'm playing at Pizza Hut, but it's actually one of the biggest jazz clubs in London. It's a nice one on the international circuit. All I was going to say
is a gig's a gig, like whatever. Yeah. Like, we'll do a couple sets of dominoes. I'm not a
right. Yeah. For Americans it sounds crazy, but that is it would be like playing at Birdland here in New York. It's a big that's a tough one to get, and I'm very happy to be back there. I have a gig in Cambridge.
That's in London?
It's in London. It's in their Soho, not our Soho here. Their Soho, which is very happening spot at night, as I discovered. Cambridge, and then another one kind of in the London area before I come back. So great tour. Really looking forward to it. Be playing with some of the people that I've played with in the past when I've been over there, and a great way. The last day I'm there will be the day that the album goes live. The street date. So it's a great way to support the album.
So it's not the whole trio then doing these dates. It's you with some musicians in these different locations.
Yeah, I have some guys that I play with in those locations. It's the cost, the finances of traveling with a band from New York around Europe with the flights. It's tough, right? Like it gets expensive. Even if you get good gigs over there, the economics of touring even with a trio can be a little severe. So I have a friend of mine who lives in Switzerland, who actually used to be my neighbor here in New York, which is kind of the connection. He moved back there, and he's been having me over for gigs, which is nice. And then I've been able to, I work with a piano player, an Italian national by the name of Marco Marconi, who's been in the London area and been based out of there for probably the last 15 years. And I do stuff with him there. So.
All right. That was my talk with Mark Wade. Do yourself a favor. Do yourself a solid. Go check out his new album titled New Stages, and also check out his other recordings. Every record of Mark's, I'm a fan of. Like I love his playing. I really like his playing. And his writing and compositions are so thoughtful. It is so much deeper than like lead sheet jazz, or even kind of his take on something someone else has done before with the trio. Is what he does with the trio and how he puts so much music history together and kind of weaves that together. It's really, really inspiring. And thank you, Mark. Thank you for releasing these wonderful recordings into the world. And thanks for being on the podcast. All right, folks, that's about all I got for this one. I will catch you on the next one in a minute.